The first one comes from Cara Reil. She's the Reil, good. She's the Group General Manager, People and Performance at GWA Group Australia. She joined GWA Group in 2017 as the Group General Manager, People and Performance. In her role, she leads the HR function across the group with a focus on building capability and culture. She has 20 years of broad-based and specialist HR experience across various industries and companies such as United Technologies Corporation, UTC, in the United States. She then moved to RBS as the Regional Head of Organisational Effectiveness for Asia, was the Director of Talent and Leadership at AMP in Australia, as well as the Vice President for Talent and Management Development for the Singtel Group, based in Singapore. Prior to joining GWA, Cara was the Group Director Human Resources at SAI Global, based in Sydney. Her talk today is titled Training for Today and Tomorrow. Welcome, Cara. And I should say, if we have some time, Cara's going to take some questions, so send them through on the app.
So hopefully you have some. Thanks for that introduction. Probably out of that long list of companies, the one that most people in the room may be familiar with is SAI Global, because we publish the standard. So that's probably the one name that people are familiar with. Well, I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about training. It's something I'm very, very passionate about over my sort of 20 years in HR. But clearly from the conversations and the discussions today, it's an industry that's also very passionate and focused on training. Not just training for me in the organization for our current employees, but I was really inspired today to hear the stories about how the industry is looking to train apprentices in the next generation. And I think it's important as we talk about the future to also think about where we've come from. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about how careers have been changing, but more importantly, how training has been changing. So to start to think about the past, we know change is talked about a lot, and a lot of people are afraid of change. I thought I'd give a personal story to show maybe why change isn't always so bad, and start with a little bit of a personal fact, which usually women don't like to share. I'm going to talk about my age. I was born in 1970. So if you think change is bad, this was the bathroom in the 1970s. So I think we can all agree that a little bit of change is good. Can you believe, I mean, this was like hip and cool back then. We were all the rage. So if you think about that back to 1970, and you think about how people thought about their careers, and think about certainly my parents and certainly my grandparents, when you thought about your working life, you pretty much went into one career, worked your way up the ladder, and started off as an apprentice or a junior, stayed in the same career. We used to always talk about it as the ladder. You spend 20, 30, 40 years, work your way up to master until you get to nirvana. You've reached retirement, you're sitting there on the beach. We all know that's not the way careers work nowadays. Now we talk about a lattice or a matrix, and even if you're staying in the same career, when I graduated from school 20 years ago, they said instead of staying with the same company, people would stay perhaps, they'd move 4 times in their career. Now the average is 12. And the challenge is, it's not that you're changing just company. Oftentimes you have people that are actually changing industry. So how does that impact training, what we're doing in a corporate world, but also how can you think about your own personal development? And I love the term this morning about lifelong apprentice, because this is actually what we talk about from an HR perspective, that all of us have to become lifelong learners. You don't reach sort of that pinnacle and you stop training. And I think the quote this morning was what in the US they're spending $1 billion, investing $1 billion for people to train up. And I love the story of hearing master plumbers at 55 going back to learn what's happening. Because we all know in this industry, things are changing very, very quickly. So we can't stop learning. So we all know learning's important. We all know it's changing. So how is training kept up? The objectives that we've had for training, to be honest, haven't changed in my 20 years. We want to make sure that we get the right information or right skills to the right people at the right time. And ultimately, we all know, I heard today, time is money at the right cost. It looks quite simple when you look it up on a piece of paper. But I think if any of you own your own companies, you're in a business, to be able to tick all these boxes is really hard. To get the right information is quite easy. We generally know what type of skills we want people to be trained up on. And I think here across the industry, you know you've got a wealth of subject matter experts. So they know the information. We know how to package it up. But how do you actually get it to the right people, particularly in an industry where a lot of your folks are out in the field? How do you get it to them when they need it and ultimately at the right cost? So when you look at those challenges, what's the journey that we've been going on from a training perspective? And once again, I thought I'd bring it back to my own career. When I started working in the 90s, things had improved a little bit with my bathroom. We've now gone from that orange color to a nice pastel. And who could forget the lovely corner bath? You still see these around somewhere. So if this is what I was looking at home, what did my life look like when I went in to go train up employees? It was pretty much the training room. Now, this is still one of the most effective ways to train people. And you saw just prior to me talking about apprentices, we know the best way to learn is to actually do. So there's nothing wrong, and it's actually a very important way to train folks, is actually that hands-on, whether it's in the classroom or in the workshop type of training. But it does have its limitations because you're actually having to bring everyone into the same location. And then back in the day, this was the only way we were able to kind of give people information or take it with us, were the massive binders. It's hard enough in a corporate world when you've got these massive binders, but if you're in your industry and you're out on the road, you can't be carting around all this information. Now, I don't want to think that everything was really back in the, back in the dark ages in the 90s when I started working, because we did have a really piece of high-tech technology to help us with training. Who remembers these? Okay, good. So I'm not the only one in the room. Show this to your kids and they're going to be like, what the heck is that? Just like when you showed them a dial phone. So this was our big technology back in the day. Then in the middle, sort of mid-90s, there was a big buzzword around e-learning. And at the time, literally, I remember being told, this is going to change the world. In the next couple of years, we're not going to be doing classroom training anymore. Everything is going online. And you're not going to have to be doing that classroom training. Absolutely going to revolutionize everything, which is great until you see what the reality of e-learning was at the time, which basically was us back in the classroom on the computers. And if you were lucky, maybe it was at your desk. And the sad thing is, e-learning didn't change really for 20 years. The screens got a little bit flatter. The graphics got a little bit nicer. But the reality is, from probably 95 when I first started doing e-training until recently, it was really regulated to more compliance training, just because it just wasn't sort of good enough training for people to get engaged with. So that was really e-learning for 20 years. And then things started to change on a very important date. We'll see if anyone can guess what this is. Does anyone know what happened on June 29th, 2007? Close. I'll give you a hint. They made a big announcement yesterday as well. iPhone. This is what when the first iPhone came out, we still had our limitations, but this was the first time we're actually able to get unplugged from our desk or the classroom and those desktop computers to being real time with people out in the field. Now, back then, even though it was sort of flexible, you have to remember what the networks were like back then. So it was really more, you could kind of connect to the internet a bit, you could give people some photos, but those screens were quite small as well. So you weren't able to do too much on the phone, but you were actually starting to get some mobility. And now, as we know, you've got a full range of mobile devices. So that's really allowing us to bring learning out into the field, real time when people need it. But more important than the devices, we're now at a point with broadband that things get really exciting. So once we move from 3G into 4G, that allows you to start to get videos. Now, we are thinking about it from a training perspective, but I think if you go out and ask your kids where they're learning everything or what they're doing, they're always on YouTube, right? So they're picking it up much faster than we are, frankly, in the corporate world on how to use training. But that's the real difference. And now when you start to think about the opportunities that are very close on the horizon with 5G, then things start to get really interesting. So you heard yesterday from Dr. Steve about our Smart Command product. So I've taken you from our 70s bathroom into the 80s. Similar to the bathroom of the future being IoT, that's where technology is heading. So we're now able to leverage those mobile devices, the broadband, a lot of just the learning systems and processes that are to really provide real-time online training to our staff. And we're now able to move beyond just e-learning to mixed reality learning. Has anyone heard of mixed reality before? I know sometimes, you've probably heard of it, but just under a different name. So a lot of the buzz recently has been around virtual reality in training. I've used it, 5 or 6 years ago when Google Glass was coming out, we were testing that for training. I've used virtual reality to try to test that for training. I'll be honest, it's a little bit clunky now. I think it's a great addition if you're trying to potentially use it for apprentices, perhaps in the training room. But you can see just even from this picture, it's still quite clunky because you've got to get the glasses on. I think it's great for gaming. But where the broadband and the technology is going, in 3 to 5 years, I think it gets interesting. But I don't think we're there yet for something that's really effective. But what is ready today is augmented reality. Is anyone using this now or has seen it? Okay, perfect. So you know what I'm talking about. So I think when I think about what's going on in this industry, not just for training your current employees on what's going on, but I love the stories this morning around the world skills and even the opening speakers about talking about the importance of bringing plumbing into the developing world. How are you going to go and try to train someone that's interested in Africa? Well, is there a TAFE or a technical school near them? Maybe not, but they can get access online to do this. So I've just got a short video for those of you that haven't seen augmented reality, and perhaps you can think about how this is applied. This isn't from GWA. It's actually from some external sources, but I think it's a good example of what's out there and available today.
Augmented reality brings instructions out of the paper manual and directly onto real equipment.
This is actually showing it's a blank room, and you can actually see where everything's set up. Looking at the plans, you can actually move it around. So you can see from that, that's just literally, you've got an iPad. You can actually do it with a mobile. I think iPad tends to be a little bit easier. I know we were talking earlier, this is something that the standards boards are looking at, where you can actually take your iPad up, bring it up to a product. It would recognize that product, and the standards pop up. So this is, real time in the field, not just potentially helping on how you set things up, but if you're doing root cause analysis, there's a problem there, and then showing you how to fix it in real time. So I think really applicable for just solving sort of on-the-job problems, but also a great way to do training. And once again, trying to look at how you do that potentially with some of those more remote locations. Everyone now has got access. They've got their devices. They've got the connections. So to me, this is the really exciting thing that's here today. I absolutely think, we will be going to virtual reality. But as I said, it's probably 3-5 years away. But that augmented reality, I think, is something that's really, really interesting for not just training the next generation, but actually providing current people with upgrading their skills. So that's a lot of the sort of technology in terms of what we're doing. And we're actually looking at how we can use augmented reality for some of the training of our employees, but potentially also our installers as we look at that Smart Command product. Because nothing's as good as kind of being there and doing that in person. But once again, do you have the time to do it? Can you get everyone in the same room to train them? With augmented reality, it's right there when they need it, just in time. The last thing I wanted to talk about is probably more for us as individuals, a little bit for organizations, but I'm not sure it gets as much advertising or sort of awareness as it could be. And it lines up a little bit with the skills program that you heard about earlier. We talk a lot about lifelong learning. And once again, whether that's for technical skills or for more academic skills, typically that is meant, once again, you've got to go back into the TAFE, a course, a university. Great if you're living here in Melbourne. There's lots of great universities that are easy to get to. More challenging if you're in a remote location, or certainly if you're in a third world developing company. How do you get access to the best education? Over the last couple years, there's just been an explosion of MOOCs, as I call them, MOOC, which is massive online courses. These are just a few examples. Most of these are either free or very low cost from top universities, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, also from a lot of technical organizations, where you can actually go on, and once again, a lot of it's either free or either a few $100s or something, taking real courses online with people. So it's a great way if you've got an organization, a company, to get your employees to access these courses. But it's just for your own personal development, also really interesting. And literally it's anything from photography to astrophysicists. So pretty much anything you can do and you want to do nowadays, you can actually find an online course from a top university, and once again, either free or low cost. So I'm really excited about where training is today. As I said, the promises that were made to me when I first started my career back in the 90s around, bringing training and making sure it was accessible to everyone, sort of when we needed it, the right information, at the right time. I've waited a long time. I'm hoping it gets there before I retire. It's finally here. And I think it's coming through those devices, and most importantly, the broadband that's coming to reality. So I think it's a great time from an organizational standpoint to have these tools at our hand. But if I think about your industry, to me, it's really, really exciting for current people in the industry, but a great way to start training the next generation. So that's all I had around the training. Hopefully there are a few questions. The other thing before I go to, I've also been told I need to remind you about the event tonight at Marvel Stadium at 5 o'clock. So training's interesting. The other thing, it's great to learn on hand. The other great way to learn is from other people. So this is a great networking opportunity. But you can also see the Smart Command products. I know we've got the display out here, but we've got the working model at Marvel Studios.
Cara, there is a question about getting a copy of your presentation, and Jacqueline's just sent me a message. We're very well coordinated here. We will be uploading presentations in video of all presenters who have given permission. Got permission?
Yeah, yep, it should be.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Nothing top secret.
Next week, so all the delegates will be notified of that. We might conclude there. We're running a bit short of time. So please thank Cara for her presentation. And we'll see you tonight.
Thank you.